In 1947, a Douglas DC-3 was found in the Sahara Desert. It had been missing for years. When rescuers opened the door, every seat was occupied. All 92 passengers were dead. They were still buckled in. Still wearing their clothes. Perfectly preserved by the desert heat. The story of a plane found in the desert with all its passengers dead in their seats has been told in various forms for over 70 years. It is one of aviation's most persistent legends. And like most persistent legends, it exists in the space between fiction and truth, because while the specific story may be invented, the reality it describes is not. The most common version goes like this. Sometime in the late 1940s, a search team in the Sahara Desert located a passenger aircraft that had been missing for several years. The plane, usually described as a Douglas DC-3, was sitting on the desert floor, largely intact. The fuselage was not breached. The doors were sealed. When the searchers opened the cabin door, they found every passenger still in their seat. All were dead. All were still buckled in. All were wearing their original clothing. The dry desert heat had mummified them. The number of passengers varies in different tellings, sometimes 36, sometimes 92, sometimes simply described as a full aircraft. No cause of death was apparent. The passengers appeared to have simply died simultaneously in their seats, without panic, without struggle, without any attempt to exit the aircraft. The story is, in all likelihood, a fabrication. No verified aviation incident matches the specific details consistently cited. The Douglas DC-3 had a maximum passenger capacity of approximately 32, making the figure of 92 impossible for that aircraft type. No official aviation accident report from any country describes the discovery of a fully intact passenger aircraft in the Sahara with all passengers dead in their seats. Despite extensive searches through archives, no historian has conclusively identified the incident. But the legend endures because it is built on a foundation of real events. And the real events are, in many ways, more haunting than the legend. Aircraft have disappeared in the Sahara Desert with disturbing regularity throughout the history of aviation. The Sahara covers 3.6 million square miles, an area roughly the size of the United States. Much of it has never been surveyed. The sand shifts constantly, burying and revealing objects in cycles that can span decades. The most famous real case is the Lady Be Good, a B-24D Liberator bomber that disappeared during a mission over North Africa on April 4, 1943. The aircraft was part of a bombing raid on Naples, Italy. On the return flight, the crew became disoriented, overshot their base in Libya, and flew deep into the Sahara Desert. They ran out of fuel and bailed out. The aircraft continued flying on autopilot for several miles after the crew bailed out, eventually making a remarkably smooth belly landing in the desert. It was not found until 1958, 15 years later, when an oil exploration team spotted it from the air approximately 400 miles south of its base. When investigators reached the Lady Be Good, they found it in extraordinary condition. The desert had preserved it almost perfectly. The radios still worked. The machine guns were still loaded and functional. Thermoses in the cockpit still contained drinkable water. The instruments were still readable. The crew was found over the following months, their remains scattered across miles of desert. They had survived the bailout but died of thirst and exposure during an attempt to walk to civilization. Their bodies were mummified by the dry heat, preserved so completely that their personal effects, including wallets and photographs, were still intact. The Lady Be Good had been sitting in the open desert for 15 years. Aircraft and patrols had passed over it countless times. The sand had not buried it. The sun had not destroyed it. It simply sat there, waiting, in one of the most desolate places on Earth. Other aircraft have been found in similar conditions. In 2012, a Polish oil company working in the Libyan desert found the wreckage of a Royal Air Force P-40 Kitty Hawk fighter that had crash-landed in 1942. The plane was remarkably well preserved. 70 years in the desert had done less damage than a few years would have done in a humid climate. The pilot's remains were never found. The Sahara is, in effect, a natural museum. The extreme dryness, the absence of moisture and biological decomposition, and the constant temperature create conditions that preserve organic and metallic materials for far longer than in any other environment on Earth. Mummified remains in the Sahara have been dated to thousands of years old. This is why the legend of the plain full of skeletons endures. It may not be a specific, verifiable incident, but it describes something that the desert is genuinely capable of doing, preserving a moment in time, perfectly, for decades or centuries. A plane that goes down in the Sahara does not decay. It waits. And there are still aircraft missing in the Sahara that have never been found. World War II alone saw hundreds of military aircraft lost over North Africa. Many crashed in areas so remote that no search was ever conducted. Their crews were listed as missing in action. Their aircraft were written off. They are still out there, under the sand, or sitting on the surface, slowly being buried and revealed by the shifting dunes. Cockpit instruments still readable. Personal effects still in pockets. Metal slowly oxidizing in the dry air, but not rusting, not crumbling, not disappearing. The desert takes everything eventually. But it takes it slowly. And sometimes, it gives things back decades later, centuries later, in conditions that make it seem like time stopped the moment the sand closed over them. The plain full of skeletons may be a legend, but the desert that inspired it is real. And somewhere beneath its surface, there are planes and people still waiting to be found. If you found this fascinating, subscribe for more stories like this. We post new videos every week.